Who were the leaders whose lives were tragically cut short? Today, we're diving into the darker side of American history, the successful assassinations of US presidents. We begin with perhaps the most famous presidential assassination in American history, the murder of Abraham Lincoln. On the evening of April 14, 1865, just 5 days after the end of the Civil War, Lincoln was attending a play at Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., with his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln. As the play was underway, a well-known actor named John Wilkes Booth snuck into the president's box and shot Lincoln in the back of the head with a .44 caliber Derringer pistol. Booth then leapt from the box onto the stage, shouting, "Sic semper tyrannis," Latin for "thus always to tyrants," and escaped through the theater's back door. Lincoln was carried to a boarding house across the street, where he lay in a coma for 9 hours before succumbing to his wounds. His death sent shockwaves through the nation, which was still reeling from the horrors of the Civil War. Booth, who was a Confederate sympathizer and had been plotting to kidnap Lincoln, was hunted down and killed by Union soldiers 12 days later. The assassination of Lincoln was part of a larger conspiracy that also targeted Vice President Andrew Johnson and Secretary of State William Seward. However, the attacks on Johnson and Seward were unsuccessful, and they both survived. The conspirators, including Booth, were eventually captured and put on trial. 4 of them were hanged, while others received lengthy prison sentences. Lincoln's death had a profound impact on the course of Reconstruction, as his vision of a more lenient and forgiving approach to the defeated South was replaced by the harsher policies of his successor, Andrew Johnson. It also cemented Lincoln's status as a martyr and a symbol of the nation's struggle to live up to its founding ideals of freedom and equality. Just 16 years after Lincoln's assassination, another president fell victim to an assassin's bullet. James A. Garfield, who had only been in office for 4 months, was shot by a disgruntled office seeker named Charles J. Guiteau on July 2, 1881. Guiteau, who was a lawyer and a religious fanatic, had been seeking a political appointment in Garfield's administration. When he was repeatedly denied, he became convinced that God had ordered him to kill the president. He stalked Garfield for weeks, finally confronting him at a train station in Washington, D.C., and shooting him twice in the back with a .44 caliber revolver. Garfield was seriously wounded but initially survived the attack. He was taken to the White House, where doctors attempted to treat his wounds. However, their efforts were hampered by poor medical practices and a lack of understanding about infection control. Garfield lingered for 2 months, his condition worsening as the bullet remained lodged in his body. He finally died on September 19, 1881, from complications related to his wounds. Guiteau was quickly apprehended and put on trial for murder. Despite his clear mental instability, he was found guilty and sentenced to death. He was hanged on June 30, 1882, still claiming that he had been acting on divine orders. The assassination of Garfield exposed the deep corruption and dysfunction within the American political system. Guiteau had been able to gain access to the president in part because of the spoils system, which allowed political appointees to be chosen based on their connections rather than their qualifications. Garfield's death helped spur the passage of the Pendleton Act in 1883, which established a merit-based civil service system and helped curb political patronage. The turn of the 20th century brought with it a new era of political and social reform, but it also saw the assassination of yet another American president. On September 6, 1901, William McKinley was shot twice by an anarchist named Leon Czolgosz while attending the Pan American Exposition in Buffalo, New York. Czolgosz, who was born in Michigan to Polish immigrants, had become radicalized by the writings of anarchist leaders like Emma Goldman. He saw McKinley as a symbol of the oppressive capitalist system and believed that his assassination would inspire a revolution. He approached the president at a receiving line, concealing his gun beneath a handkerchief, and fired 2 shots at close range. McKinley initially seemed to be recovering from his wounds, but he took a turn for the worse and died on September 14, 1901. His vice president, Theodore Roosevelt, was sworn in as president and went on to become one of the most influential and transformative leaders in American history. Czolgosz was quickly tried and convicted of murder, despite concerns about his mental health. He was executed by electric chair on October 29, 1901, just 45 days after the assassination. His last words were, "I killed the president because he was the enemy of the good people, the working people." The assassination of McKinley marked a turning point in American history, as it ushered in a new era of progressive reform and increased government intervention in social and economic issues. It also led to a strengthening of the Secret Service and increased security measures around the president, as the nation grappled with the reality of political violence and the threat of anarchism. The most recent successful presidential assassination in American history is also perhaps the most controversial and enigmatic. On November 22, 1963, John F. Kennedy was riding in an open-top convertible through the streets of Dallas, Texas, when he was shot by a sniper named Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald, a former U.S. Marine with a history of erratic behavior and Soviet sympathies, fired 3 shots from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building. 2 of the shots struck Kennedy in the head and neck, while a third wounded Texas Governor John Connally, who was riding in the same car. Kennedy was rushed to Parkland Hospital, where he was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. Oswald was apprehended by police later that day and charged with the murder of Kennedy and the killing of a Dallas police officer named J.D. Tippit. However, before he could stand trial, Oswald was himself shot and killed by a nightclub owner named Jack Ruby, who claimed to be acting out of grief and anger over Kennedy's death. The assassination of Kennedy shocked the nation and the world, as the charismatic young president had captured the imaginations of millions with his vision of a new frontier and his call to public service. His death was mourned by people of all political persuasions and sparked an outpouring of grief and remembrance. However, the circumstances surrounding Kennedy's assassination have also been the subject of intense scrutiny and controversy. The official investigation, known as the Warren Commission, concluded that Oswald had acted alone and that there was no evidence of a conspiracy. However, many people have questioned the commission's findings and have put forward alternative theories, ranging from CIA involvement to a Soviet plot to a mafia hit. The assassination of Kennedy remains one of the defining moments of the 20th century, and its impact continues to be felt to this day. It marked a loss of innocence for the nation and a shattering of the optimism and idealism of the early 1960s. It also raised deep questions about the nature of political power, the role of the media, and the resilience of American democracy in the face of tragedy and trauma. The successful assassinations of Abraham Lincoln, James A. Garfield, William McKinley, and John F. Kennedy are some of the darkest chapters in American history. These tragic events not only cut short the lives of 4 remarkable leaders, but also sent shockwaves through the nation and the world, altering the course of history in profound and lasting ways. As we reflect on these assassinations, it's important to remember the bravery and sacrifice of the men who lost their lives in service to their country. Each of these presidents, in their own way, embodied the highest ideals of the American experiment: the belief in freedom, justice, and the power of the individual to shape their own destiny. Thank you for joining us on this somber but important journey through some of the most tragic moments in American history. If you found this episode informative and thought-provoking, please like and subscribe to Journey Across History Official for more deep dives into the people, events, and ideas that have shaped our world. Until next time, keep learning and keep exploring the endlessly fascinating story of the human experience.